In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint skin tone, and I'm going to attempt to reproduce a painting of a young boy by Alice Neal. To start off, I just want to say that the colors that I have on my palette are permanent green, cobalt blue, burnt sienna, cadmium red, yellow ochre, and Naples yellow. Now there are a couple of other colors that you could certainly add to your palette if you wanted to. Cadmium yellow being one, and alizarin crimson as well. Or one could substitute a raw or burnt umber for raw sienna. As you can see, I've already done something of an underpainting. It's very loose. I imagine that Alice Neal probably, if she did do an underpainting, probably used a very loose underpainting. Being a 20th century painter and probably considering herself more influenced by the modern painters, I imagine that she probably used a direct method. And judging from the look of her painting, I'm going to use my best guess to reproduce her results. Okay, so because I've already done a little bit of an overpainting, I already have my canvas surface is already somewhat moist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right ahead and start with the forehead area, and I'm going to start with a little bit of yellow ochre. And I'm going to brush that in. The subject matter is lit from the side, so on this side you can see there's a cool reflection on the forehead, and on this side of the head you can see that the forehead there's more of a direct light, a warmer light. And the forehead here just seems to have more of whatever the local value of the skin is. Now as I'm painting, I see it feels like it's a little bit transparent. Maybe there could be a little bit of color under there. I'm going to go back and grab a little bit of burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of Naples. The burnt sienna darkens it up, of course, and the Naples yellow is a lighter pigment, so it makes it somewhat more opaque. There aren't really any heavy dark shadows in this portrait. As you can see, mostly the shadows are under the eyes, and the values in the face are relatively even in middle value range. Now right away, from my eye, the most interesting thing about this painting is that over on this side of the forehead, the cool light, the ambient light, which is reflecting coming from this direction, has a definite cool cast to it. And that's where our green comes in. And I'm going to brush that in on top of the Naples, or excuse me, the ochre, to cool off this side of the head. And I'll try and balance that as I go. Balance that, I mean, in terms of the ochre in relation to the amount of green. I am using a little bit of linseed oil to help me blend and spread today. There's also seems to be just a little bit of the green right here in this in the forehead, between just above the bridge of the nose. Up here on this part of the upper part of the forehead is where our direct light is coming from, and so I'm just going to add some titanium white to that. And also above the eyebrow here. since the yellow ochre pretty much is the basis of my skin tone here, I'm going to continue laying down a bottom layer of that. Not too heavy, just a kind of a thin layer. And then later on, can build up the levels of paint. Okay, so the first very heavily shadowed part of the face that I come to is under here, under the eye. And you can see I've already added in my underpainting some burnt sienna to get that shadow. And the shadow, the line of the eyelids is a warm dark, so that's kind of also a burnt sienna derived color. The eyelashes are a little bit darker, so in order to get that, I'm just going to add some blue to my burnt sienna. And add that in. Since I've got this on my brush, I'm going to go ahead and add this to the eye. The lashes. On both sides. I'm going to approach the nose next. Now it looks to me like what I think my approach here is going to be lay down a layer of ochre, and then to darken that, on one side of the nose I'll add burnt sienna, and to lighten it I will add Naples yellow. The first time I saw Alice Neal's paintings, I immediately saw the influence of Van Gogh's painting style. And I was attracted to it immediately. Now, because her style is very gestural, meaning that she doesn't spend a lot of time blending, you can almost see where parts of the face are just painted with a single brush stroke, and you really get that feeling in the nose. You really feel like it's just one long stroke there, defining the shadow on the nose. And just the thinnest line here to define the other side of the nose. So whereas a classical painter would spend a lot of time blending and getting rid of that outline, Alice will occasionally let that outline dominate. So she's sort of playing hide and seek with the outlines here, and this is also something that is very typical of modern painters, those influenced by French Impressionist painters like Van Gogh. By the way, I'm using a number 4 round. In case you're wondering. What I like about this palette is that the green really goes well with the ochre. Ochre is kind of it's a very strange color. I guess it has maybe a little bit of green in it, but for some reason it goes well with this green. And you can use this green to darken the ochre, but it won't darken it by a lot. It's just, it cools it off and darkens it up. It seems to work very well when you're dealing with ambient light shadows that are falling on one side of the face. So you can tell that I'm moving quickly, and my brush strokes are very brisk, and I'm painting a lot with the belly or the barrel of the brush, not very much with the tip, only with the toe of the brush when I want to get some thin, detailed lines. And I shorten up the stroke a little bit. I don't quite make it so heavy when there's areas where I know I'm going to come and overpaint with another pigment. In this case, in the upper lip, I'm going to be lightening that up with Naples yellow. The surface of the canvas now, most of the face has now got a decent layer of pigment on top of it. You can see how I've already developed the shadows and the highlights up here and on certain parts of the nose. So the next thing I have to do now is come out here on the cheeks and around the eyes and give it some dimension. So what I want to do now is start over here and work across, and I'm going to clean my brush, get it nice and clean, and I'm going to use a little bit of Naples yellow now. And I think I'll have to come on top of that with a little more white. The Naples yellow is different from the cadmium, as you know. The cadmium is more of a banana yellow. The Naples is more, maybe, I guess you could call it more of a buttery, softer yellow. It's not so acidic. Doesn't have that citrusy quality of yellow that the cadmium has. All these colors I'm working with are fairly transparent colors. And because of that, I'm really going to have to work hard to manufacture some opacity here. But mostly where I'm going to be achieving that is where I add the lighter colors. The Naples yellow and the white are going to sustain the most opacity on my palette. All right, now I want to address the eyes and the shadows in the eyes. The thing that strikes me about the way she's painted this eye is again, it's very quick, just a few strokes to capture the shadow. You see there's a strong contrast right here, so I want to get that well defined. And then this is going to be a little bit lighter, these strokes coming down here. You'll notice on the this side of the nose that there's a slight bit of a kind of a green cast. So that's another opportunity for me to use the permanent green, and I'm just a very little bit. In fact, I'm going to dilute that with some white before I add it in. Oh boy, it's very bright. Okay. It should be a little bit grayer. Just want to neutralize this a little bit. And of course, by now you know neutralizing means desaturating the colors, graying them out a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of white to Naples yellow, and now I want to work on the upper lip, which is catching light. So it's very interesting here, just in this intersection, you've got three or four different distinct colors going on. The more yellowy, richer tone here, the shadow here, and then somewhat diluted highlight. Which also gets picked up here around the boy's nostril. And it comes up under his eye and is casting a kind of a crescent shadow, or excuse me, the light is casting a crescent highlight across his cheek. There's a little bit of ambient light being caught over here. Not quite as cool as the green, so I'm just going to use the same combination of white and Naples yellow over here. The boy's hand is in his chin, so he's got this odd scrunching up of his chin. So let me just brush in this approximate area of color here. Come back and fix that later. All right, let me see, where am I now? Okay, let me work this. So you can see that this seems to be this color with a little bit of gray in it, slightly neutral, more neutral. So let's neutralize that combination of Naples yellow and white. And that's not bad. Okay, that's close. And she just did a great job here of catching all the different qualities of light that are hitting his face. It almost reads as a kind of a gray, but it's just it's a warm, neutral color that she's getting down here. All right, not bad. A decent approximation, I think, of what I'm going for. I just want to make this a little bit darker to boost the contrast. And now let's go over to his other cheek, and let's now see if I can sculpt this a little better. I'm actually going to go in for maybe a little bit of cadmium here. I want to warm up that. I want to warm up the the burnt sienna that I've painted into under his eyes, and because I'm also thinking that since I have the red in his face, excuse me, the green in his face, it would be nice if I could complement that green with a little bit of red, not too much. I want your eye to be aware of it, but I don't want it to be too intrusive. So a lot of times then you can work back and forth between the burnt sienna and the red. You can do a lot of good things when it comes to doing portraiture, because they really work to darken the skin, but you still keep that sense of living flesh, and it doesn't start to feel like gray, dead matter, which can happen if you attempt to darken skin sometimes with blues or blacks. That can happen. Not always. If you're careful, it won't. But it's something that as a beginner you want to take care of, not to get those gray tones that really don't flatter your subject at all. I'm going to, let me see, where am I now? Okay, I should probably lighten up the nose a little bit. So grab dip my brush into the Naples yellow, and let's see if I can bring that out a little bit on this side of his nose. And yes, indeed, that does look a lot better. And then on this side of the nose, catch that highlight right here. She has a fairly strong, the strongest dark tones are in the eyes and in the nostrils. So let's add those in. Reinforce the contour here with a darker line. Same thing over here. Let's just reinforce that a little bit. And there's all kinds of really subtle things going on here in the nose. You'll notice there's just a little bit of a highlight coming right there. I should go and probably darken this up a little bit. A late entry into our palette right now today. I'm just going to plop it down in the middle as a little bit of alizarin crimson. And the alizarin crimson is ideal for our lips. So far I've painted the whole thing with one brush, which probably shows. But the object of this lesson is not so much blending as it is using colors. So I want to neutralize this a little bit. I want to lighten it and maybe add just a touch of green to it. Until I get kind of a middle value. It's a little bit light still. Take and add a little bit more green. Oh, let me see. Too much green, I think. And this is for the upper lip. So let's. It is a little bit too gray. So let me go back in with just a little bit more of the alizarin crimson and try again. And I think that looks a little bit better. And then you'll notice on the lower lip, it's just a little bit of this value, and then she brings in, lightens that up. So let's bring some white into the equation. And the main contrast I want is just right here where the lower lip and the upper lip and the lower lip meet. Now I've got a very rough edge around where the lip and the upper lip, excuse me, I don't know what you call this part. The lip and this upper part meet. So I clean my brush, get some pigment, and let's see if I can make that edge read a little more starkly. Yeah, it's looking better. I'm going to add a little bit of blue, cobalt blue, to the alizarin crimson to draw in the shadow that you see. Oh, that's not working. The shadow that you see between the lips. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to work on the eyes now. So obviously the eyes are very dark. I'm going to start off with burnt sienna, and I'm going to lay down a little bit more opaque layering of that. This is just my base. Because now, on top of that, cobalt blue. Same thing over here. To darken up the eye. And then get, just for the eyelashes, it's a nice heavy stroke across the bottom. It looks, you know, you don't, with her style of painting, she would never kind of zoom in and do individual strands of hair like you would see, for instance, if you looked at a portrait by Frida Kahlo. She loved that kind of detail, but Alice Neal was more gestural, and so with one stroke she was catching all that detail, or she was in, let me say, she was implying the detail, she wasn't capturing it. Now that my eyes are tuned into these darker values, I'm looking at the painting and seeing where else I need to bring in these shadows. And one of those places now is in the hand. Now, you can imagine that one of the reasons why her painting style is so quick is because I imagine that these were live sittings, maybe not for the whole sitting, but at least initially, these were live sittings, and so these boys look like they're about 7 or 8 years old. I imagine they probably got very antsy after a little while, so she was probably trying to capture as much information as she could in a short amount of time as she could while her models were still with her. Okay, now to finish up, I'm just going to quickly try and add in some value into the hair, and for that I'm going to grab a different brush. More of a flat brush. Just quickly kind of block in the boy's hairline. And then, of course, you can guess on top of this, I'm going to go over with cobalt blue. See how this works. Uh, Unfortunately, I won't be able to get into very much of the texture for the hair, but at least this helps me see where my values are and how things are looking overall. And the last part I want to do here is just add some whites to the eyes. And I'm just going to make that a slightly cooler white. I'm going to add a little bit of, make that a kind of a cool neutral. You can see I'm adding a little cobalt blue. There's a little something else in there. I'm not quite sure. I picked up off the palette. And add that in. And highlight right there. Same thing here on this side. I have a little brush that that brush left over on my paint that left over on my brush. I don't want to waste it, so I'm just gonna find some places where I think it'll fit in. In other words, spreading that over on some of the areas where I already have some cool values going on. At this point, I'm just looking at edges and details, and like right here, I wanted to soften that edge up a little bit. I probably could benefit from maybe adding a little more value here, so I'll lighten this up. A little more light value here in this area. Now I'm just wanting to make sure that everything is working in terms of the values contributing to the dimensionality of the figure. Wherever I'm losing the contrast, I'm going to go back and build it back up again. I feel like I just need to go in with a little bit more of my burnt sienna. Here on the forehead. Oh, okay, I see. I know what I'm missing. So the last part I need to do is put in this shadow right here. I was thinking to myself, there's something flat and unfinished, and that's what it is. Not that anyone's going to mistake my painting for Alice Neal's, but at least now I feel like as a study, I've covered most of the parts of her painting. Obviously, I haven't paid much attention to the ears or the fingers, but I think that this will suffice. Just want to roll up a detail here on the nostrils. One final touch here. And that's it. So there you are. Thank you for watching.